Hello everyone. In the previous videos, we discussed about the people who belonged to the noble classes, the knight and his team, and also the monk, the fair, and the prioress who belonged to the church, the religious people, and the people who belonged to the higher classes. Now, let's discuss about the people of the middle class, the rising middle class. The first person whom we meet in this category is the merchant. Now, the merchant can be thought of as a fashionista. Chaucer says he had a forking beard, motley dress, and a Flemish beaver hat. Now, all these were kind of the fashions of the period, and we could understand that the merchant was a person who followed the fashion of the time. And he also kind of had a prosperous or a rich appearance. And this person, he had a lot of opinions. Opinions about what? Opinions and pursuits on his increase of capital and how there should be sea police upon the Harwich Holland ranges. That is, he had opinions about how to protect the trade routes. Because he is a merchant, if he has to make money, he should also have safer trade routes. So he is a person who looks rich. He is also interested in topics that is related to money and trade. He was an expert at dabbling in exchanges. Exchanges is the selling of foreign currency at a profit. Now, he was also an expert in doing this in money related matters. Now, after saying all this, Chaucer reveals that nobody had any idea that this person, the merchant, was in debt. In order to look this sophisticated, this rich, he was borrowing more money from others. And finally, according to Chaucer, the merchant was an excellent fellow, but I don't know his name. Now, this shows that the merchant had a rich appearance. He had a very sophisticated appearance, but there was no substance in him. That Chaucer did not even care to know the name of this person. Here we have a picture of the merchant. Now, moving forward, Chaucer talks about the Oxford cleric. Cleric is a student who is preparing for the priesthood to become a priest. Now, unlike all the religious people whom we have met in the poem, the prologue, till now, Oxford cleric is a very simple man. Now, before we met the prioress, the monk, and the friar, who had a very worldly appearance and also their interests were also very materialistic. But here, in the case of this Oxford cleric, it's very different. He stands as a contrast when we compare him to the others. Now, Chaucer begins with his appearance. He says that the Oxford cleric, he had a horse which was thinner than a rake. It was charming, and because of that, the horse was very thin. And not only the horse, even the Oxford cleric himself, he was also not too fat. He had a hollow look because of not eating enough food. And the thread upon his overcoat was bare. He was wearing an overcoat that was worn out. It was not anything new or anything that is luxurious, a simple overcoat which is worn out. He did not have any advancement in the church and he was too unworldly, unlike the previous religious people that we met. This person is not interested in the materialistic things. And thus, he was also not employed. He was an unemployed student. He was simply too unworldly to make a search for any employment, for any secular employment. Chaucer also points out his love for books, not Chaucer's, but the Oxford lyrics. Now, this person had a lot of books, at least 20 books beside him on his bed. And these books were in red and black color, and they were of important topics about Aristotle's philosophy, not any such books, not any books on any simple topics, but Aristotle's philosophies. And he preferred having these books instead of having any costly clothes or maybe musical instruments like fiddle or psaltery. We have these lines in the poem. He preferred having 20 books in red and black of Aristotle's philosophy than costly clothes, fiddle, or psaltery. And Chaucer says, though a philosopher, as I have told, he had not found the stone for making gold. So, even though he is a philosopher, he has immense knowledge on various subjects. He has not found how to use this knowledge in order to make money. So, if he is not employed and he has not found any way to use his knowledge to make money, how does he get money? He gets money from his friends. And whatever money he gets from his friends, he used it on learning. He spent it on learning and or maybe to buy another book. And afterwards, he would pray for these people who would lend him money in return for paying him the amount. All that this person cared about is only to study. His only care was to study, and he never spoke a word more than what was needed. He would not just blabber about anything, he would only talk when it is needed. He was respectable in nature. Whenever he spoke, his speech was short and to the point. He also had a tone of moral virtue. And finally, Chaucer says he was not only glad to learn, but he was also very glad to teach others. He did not keep his knowledge to himself, he also shared it with others, and he was glad to do that. So, the Oxford cleric whom we just met, he is an unemployed Oxford student, someone who is learning to become a priest, and he is living a very simple life. And his love for the books, love for learning, is what Chaucer highlights here. And we understand that the Oxford cleric is more of a philosopher than a religious person. He is more into learning, he is more into books than he is into religion. And Chaucer seems to have a good impression about this person. Here we have the picture of the Oxford cleric. He has the book with him, the man who loved books. Moving forward, we have a new character, the sergeant at the law. Now, as we discuss the merchant, the Oxford cleric, and the sergeant at the law, we are meeting different characters, different people from the middle class of the society. Now, unlike the previous two characters whom we met, unlike the Oxford cleric and the merchant, the sergeant at the law seems to have found something from which he could earn a living properly. Now, the merchant, he seemed rich, but he had a lot of debts. The Oxford cleric, he was also struggling, he was also not having enough money with him. But the sergeant at the law is someone who is successful at what he does. The sergeant at the law is just like the lawyers we have today, a medieval version of a lawyer. He is a lawyer appointed by the king or the monarch, and he sometimes serves as a judge also, depending on his talent and how much wise he is. And this sergeant we are talking about, he is wary and wise, and he is noted for his excellence. He was also discreet, he was very careful with the job that he did, and he was a man of reverence. Chaucer says that his sayings were so wise that he often had been the justice of Assize. Now, this is the position that the monarch or the king gave a lawyer when he was very wise. So, the lawyer would go to different parts of the country, hear the cases, and give the judgments. And Chaucer goes on praising our sergeant at the law. He says, by letters he was patent and in full commission. His fame, his learning, and his high position had won him many a robe and many a fee. And again, we understand that there was no such conveyancer as he. There was no other lawyer as good as he. And all was fee simple. There was nothing that he owed anyone. He did not have to pay any debts. Whatever he owned, it was fee simple. And the only thing that Chaucer points out as something that doesn't fit his character is that though he was so busy, he was pretending that he was busier than he actually is. But again, he knew of every judgment, case, and crime ever recorded since King William's time. That is, that would be about 400 years' time. He knew all the cases and all the laws that were made since the time of King William's. He could dictate defenses or draft deeds. He was so good at what he does that he could simply dictate all the defenses and the draft deeds. And no one could pinch a comma from his creeds. What he writes is word tight. You can never take out even a comma or a word from what he has written, saying that it is not important. And then, after talking about how good a lawyer he is, how good his talents are, how suitable he is for this profession, Chaucer talks about his appearance. Chaucer doesn't too much describe about his appearance. He simply says that the sergeant at the law wore a party colored coat and he had a belt, a silken belt, which means he was simply dressed. So we have the sergeant, the lawyer, who handled many cases. He knew all these laws by heart, and thus he also got fees from his clients. And whatever he told was very wise. And he was a busy man, but he seemed to pretend that he's more busier than he actually is. So maybe because he's proud of himself and he's making himself seem more important. Now, we can make a slight comparison between the merchant and the sergeant at the law, if we want. Because the merchant, he was a very busy looking, prosperous looking man from the outside. But we said he did not have any substance. He was in debt. His trade was not going well. He was not good at what he did. But on the other hand, we had the sergeant at the law. His physical appearance, his dressing style was very simple, but he was a man of wisdom. Here's a picture of the sergeant at the law. So we have discussed the merchant, the Oxford cleric, and the sergeant at the law. We'll meet the other characters in the coming videos. Thank you so much for watching.